And also, we do prefer that all non-participants please keep their microphones muted throughout this presentation. Ms. Camire will go over the ways that we can that you can ask questions through the process. So, good evening. My name is Brad Jackson, and welcome to our first of what perhaps may be many, judging from the fact that we have 131 participants, conversation about parenting during a pandemic. Two words that I never thought I would see together. Tonight is, I can tell you that my wife is excited about tonight, more just about the fact that hosting this event tonight got me out of my sweatshirt. And I put a sweater on for everybody today, so I think she's enjoying that. When we originally had scheduled this, we purposely scheduled it early on after we had expected the governor to be making his pronouncement and decision about school closures being delayed or being extended due to the pandemic. But I didn't realize that we were also going to be scheduling it after 36 hours of cold, damp, and rainy weather where everyone has been stuck in the house today. So I think that may be contributing to one of the reasons why we have so many participants. If I would, I'd like to be able to thank tonight's sponsors. This is an event that is being put together by three groups. The first is MindShare, which is the parent education portion of the Holliston Parent Teacher Organization. Our second sponsor for tonight is the Holliston Special Ed Parent Advisory Council. And then, of course, we are, as members of the Holliston Public Schools, are pleased to sponsor this as well. Ms. Camire, our Director of Student Services, and I will be acting as moderators tonight and trying to keep the conversation flowing. And with that, I'll turn this over to Meg so she.
Thanks, Brad. So the first thing, and we will try our best to talk clearly and hopefully at a volume that you can hear in your homes. We're competing with wind and rain and Zoom, so we'll see how that goes. But just to sort of set some expectations in terms of participation, you might have observed your children or others or professionally being part of Zoom calls, but for the purpose of tonight's presentation, just some Zoom norms. The panelists will be on video when they're speaking, and participants are able to listen in throughout the whole thing. If you want your video off, please, you can turn off your video. And if you would also keep muted throughout, we would appreciate that. We will use the chat function for any questions that might arise throughout our presentation. And again, sort of keep your audio on mute just to sort of allow for greater clarity from the panelist. Our goal for this evening, as Dr. Jackson mentioned, is really just to sort of begin the conversation in recognizing this dramatic shift that families are experiencing in their home now. Tonight, we're not going to tackle questions around MCAS or grades. Right now, we really are trying to focus on sort of what's happening in our homes and parenting and supporting one another in terms of, again, the unique circumstances that we have been experiencing for the past several weeks. So if there are questions like that, please feel free to send them our way, but we're going to try our best to focus on some broader topics. For tonight, I just want to introduce the panelists, the group of professionals that we are grateful came together in such a short amount of time to outreach to the community. The first panelist I'd like to introduce is Dr. Nami Turk. She's a clinical psychologist who has been practicing for over 30 years. She works with children and adolescents and their families, and she specializes in evaluations in mood disorder and neurodevelopmental disorders. Dr. Turk has also provided school-based clinical consultation, neuropsychological evaluations, professional development, and parent workshops in many public school districts in the area. She's been partnering with Holliston for well over 10 years. Gretchen Powers is a clinical social worker and adjustment counselor at RAMS. She has more than 20 years of experience working with adolescents in clinics as well as hospital settings. But thankfully, she finds the school setting a critical place to intervene with teens on a daily basis. Her particular passion is in trying to help teens learn the skills of self-compassion to help address the high levels of stress, anxiety, and depression that they are experiencing. Brielle Chadsey, our next panelist, is a school counselor at Miller School for grades 3 through 5 students. She's worked in the district for over 10 years. And just a little brag, she is the girls varsity soccer coach of the recent Holliston High School state champions. Our next panelist we're very grateful to have on tonight is Jackie Weiner. She is a licensed social worker and she is the director of Holliston Youth and Family Services, where she oversees social services for the town of Holliston. Jackie and her colleagues are passionate about clinical social work, and they provide the community with free mental health counseling to any Holliston resident in need. The last panelist, new to our group, we're so excited to have her tonight, is Barbara Ryan. She is a wife and a mom of a 4th and 8th grader. She loves her family, nature, traveling, baking, and board games, and writing. Barbara moved to Holliston this past summer of 2019, and she has a background in healthcare, including pediatric nurse practitioner, public health, executive production, and communications and risk communications. Barbara is passionate about the betterment of the community, and she signed up to lead the PTO MindShare late last fall. And she has since solicited the help of her neighbor, Jen Prince, who is also new to Holliston, and we're grateful for their partnership. This evening, when this group sort of got together a couple weeks back, we had some large guiding questions. We also are grateful some folks sent us questions in advance to help really sort of frame the conversation for tonight. I'll leave you with, these are sort of our 5 areas that we are hoping to cover tonight in this idea of pandemic parenting. We use this image of a roller coaster because myself as a parent and even professionally feel like I'm on this up and down roller coaster that we've been experiencing since about March 13th or even sooner for some of us. So these are the areas that we hope you're able to connect with, and hopefully you walk away with something that really resonates with you and you can take back to your home and your work supporting yourself and your children. Dr. Turk, I will put myself on mute and transition it over to you.
Thank you, Meg, and good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and really, I am at this point sitting down and taking a deep breath just to sort of center myself as a way of beginning this conversation. And it is really a pleasure both to consult in Holliston, which I have been doing, as Meg said, for the past decade plus, and also to be a part of this conversation tonight. So one of the things that I think is important is to talk about the fact that, you know, we keep on hearing, and it's true, we're all in this together. But as much as we are all in this together, the truth of the matter is that there are commonalities and disparities. We're not all having the exact same experience at any point in time. And there are many of us who are having radically different experiences from one another. And I think tonight you're going to hear in the conversations the fact that you will relate to some things and other things may not be relevant to you at all, and that's fine. And maybe it'll be relevant in a week from now or perhaps ever. Because to this pandemic, we each bring another P, which is our personalities, and our personalities and our family cultures and our mindsets guide how we experience all of this, and it, you know, the trickle down effect to our kids as well. And what I see here at this point is that, you know, in the continuum of human experience right now, we are sitting in two different spectrums. And one of them is what we collectively as a group, when we were beginning to plan this evening, we call the spectrum of muck. We're mucking our way through each day, sometimes more effectively than other days, and sometimes we're not even sure what effective means. And I think that's important to keep in mind, and also to honor that there's no value judgment around that. The other spectrum that we are simultaneously in is the spectrum of compassion. And compassion comes in all different sizes and shapes and forms, and it's never quite perfect, because if it was perfect, it would be sterile. And we are not sterile beings. We are full of emotions, sometimes great, sometimes powerfully negative, and all of it together creates who we are and the experiences that we're having and the experiences that our kids are having too. And I think what's really important is to remember that, you know, in the days when we got to go on airplanes and not have to think about anything, the only conversation about masks were when the flight attendants would get up and say, and we'll be on those planes again, make sure that you put on your mask first before helping somebody else. And I think that I framed that before I go into my slides by talking about the fact that we're going to be talking a lot about self-care. And you'll hear from other panelists this evening about self-care and its importance. Self-care, for the pieces that I'm going to talk about, have everything to do with the notion of building upon compassion and moving toward empathy. If you can't take care of yourself and know how you're feeling, then it's really hard to understand and empathize with your kids and for other people for whom you are providing care. And I think with that, I'm going to move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about 5 stages of grief. This is what many people know as the Kubler-Ross model. And I bring it up here because we are all experiencing grief and loss, different kinds of loss. Some of us are experiencing loss of somebody that we know, or somebody else who knows somebody else who has succumbed to this terrible disease. Some of us have experienced loss of a loved one. We've also experienced losses of relevant and exciting milestones. We've experienced losses of control of our daily routine. And those are just to name a few. And in that experience, while this is supposed to be a linear progression from denial to acceptance, I would argue that for the situation we're in, there are all sorts of twists and turns, and one day we might be feeling one thing, and some of us might be progressing all the way through from beginning to end, but more likely we're stepping in and out of these different stages at different points in time. And I think that that is a different model, and important to realize that just because you might be feeling really sad and lonely one day and in denial the next, does not mean that you are regressing. It means that you are being present for each of the experiences that are occurring for you. And this also helps you to recognize that it might be the same for your kids. So I'm going to just briefly go through these stages. There's denial, and that's a brief defense that really helps buffer the experience. If you can flip back to the other slide, Meg. The experience of shock. And then anger sets in, because denial is not a permanent condition unless you really want to divorce yourself from reality. People then move away from the anger because they want to seek some control over their emotions and reach for hope amid the reality of a situation. But this is a sort of shaky place to be, because there's a lot of magical thinking there. If only I could do this, if only I had said this, if only I had done this, then I could have fixed this problem. And the truth of the matter is that the loss of control makes you want to try to regain control through unrealistic expectations. And when that hits, really the recognition of loss as being something permanent, a permanent condition, occurs. We're in this, we're stuck in this. And that leads to sadness and hopelessness and helplessness. And then at some point, there is the notion of acceptance, and you accept what's happened. It becomes what everybody calls the new normal, although in this case, hopefully not for very long or that much longer, and we begin again. And now I want to actually talk about something that I think is really important, which is that when we regress back and forth, that is normal. And when we shift back and forth, and when we see in our kids developmental regressions, all of a sudden your teen is pushing new limits, or perhaps returning to old limits and pushing them again. There are altered sleep cycles. Your 7-year-old is tantrum-ing like a 2-year-old. Your 4-year-old who was toileted last year all of a sudden is having nighttime bathroom accidents. Your kids can't concentrate, and frankly, neither can we all the time. And really that lack of concentration isn't just because of the environmental things surrounding us that are making it really hard to concentrate in these new environments, but also because when you're feeling angry, when you're feeling depressed, and when you're feeling anxious, you're internally distracted. It's really hard to pay attention. And I think that those are things that are true. But over time, they settle in and they are not irreversible. They will change back. And I think that having patience around that is really important. That doesn't mean that you don't set limits and keep rules, but understanding that these are reflections, these are ways of communicating some of these stages of grief. But the other piece about this is that with regression, there's another side that comes into play, and that is newfound independence, new relationships with siblings, courage that you maybe didn't have before, your kids didn't have before, to try to make it through day by day. And this is no small feat. And it's important to remind ourselves that just because there are these feelings of anger and anxiety, that we should never underestimate our own grit as parents. You should never sell yourself short around this, even on the days when you can't pick yourself up off the couch to do anything and your kids are sitting in front of the screen endlessly. Because from our grit of pushing through, we lay the groundwork for resilience in our kids. And that is something that will come out of this experience. Now I'm going to flip to the next slide, Meg. So one of the things that I think is important to look at is how things change over time. So when we're in a state of denial, it's the status quo. You're sort of frozen. You don't move. And at that point, as parents, when your child is in that state, what you want to really be able to do is communicate information. As they used to say on Dragnet, just the facts. Knowledge is power, and it also helps people shift out of a state of shock and denial. When you're in that place of anger and frustration, and that leads to depression, your equilibrium is completely disrupted. And you and your children might react with anger or with fear, which are manifestations of that frustration and that depression. And as parents, what we can best do is watch and listen and support. A moment here, I want to just speak to the notion of situational emotional reactions and then pre-existing emotional situations, and how to watch and listen and support for each of those. And the word patience really comes into mind. Even if your child has already struggled with anxiety in the past, or even if your family is predisposed to mood disorders, and you're worried because you're seeing a slide in terms of presentation, watch and listen and support, and don't move directly to crisis. I will just say one caveat around that, which is that if safety is an issue, then you seek help right away. And the other piece is that while you want to watch and listen and support, it doesn't mean that you have to do it by yourself. And I'll leave that to Jackie Weiner to talk about a little bit more later on, as well as Brielle Chadsey and Gretchen Power, in terms of how to utilize different resources and when to utilize those resources. And then as time goes on, we begin to experiment. We're experimenting in our own homes right now. Who does school in what room? When does it happen? How do we integrate new routines into our family? We start to build this whole new model of how we're functioning, and we're maintaining the tension of it feeling permanent, but also knowing at the same time it's temporary. And so what we have to do is allow for people to explore, allow for our children to explore, and to begin to accept it in this way. And our job as parents, our jobs are to give time, let that exploration occur, let them test things out, because that actually helps to build the resilience, but also creates user-friendly opportunities for kids to feel comfortable. So feeling things out within reason really does make sense. And then finally, really what happens is the notion of integration. Your mind and your heart begin to pull together what's going on and build or rebuild the world that is now in front of yours. And in those moments, there's a sense of feeling committed, feeling focused. And I think our jobs at that point as parents and as clinicians is to celebrate those small victories, because baby steps of success lead to a sense of well-being overall, and that's crucial. So now I'm going to just move on to the next slide, because I think what I want to finish with is a message before I turn this over to the next panelist, which is that, you know, there's a saying, live and learn. And we are living and learning, but we're also learning how to live in this stage in time. And sometimes it works well, and sometimes it really doesn't. And in those moments when it doesn't, we really need to do three things. PRP, we need to pause, we need to breathe. We need to hit the reset button. And sometimes when you hit the reset button, it takes a little longer for the system to reboot, and that's okay too. Don't keep on hitting it and hitting it. Patience, again, is what's crucial here. And when that green light on the reset button goes on, and you'll feel it in your gut, you pivot. And how you pivot is by changing perspective. And I'm just going to tell a little story here by way of conclusion, which is that, you know, there's this one time my husband and I were trying to move a heavy sofa up a windy staircase, and it got stuck. And he's yelling at me, I'm yelling at him. We're both sweating profusely at this point. The sofa will not budge no matter what we do. And this goes on for a few minutes. And finally, I couldn't hold it up anymore. So I put down my side. And then my husband did the same thing as well. We took a breather, argued a little bit more, took another breather, and then said, let's just give this another whirl. And I went to the other side of the couch, and he went to the side that he hadn't been on before. And miraculously, it just moved right up the stairs. And so what sometimes feels really stuck just needs a break. It needs a deep breath. And when you're feeling frustrated and flustered, it's actually really hard to breathe. It's the same way you don't say to somebody, calm down, when they're all upset, because they can't calm down, they're upset. So there's this one technique, and some of the kids in Holliston know it just by way of the consultation work I've done. And it is a very quick way of regulating your breathing. And I just want to show it to you and then conclude. If you take your thumbs and you curl your fist around them and squeeze them tight and put them on your knees, and as you squeeze your thumbs, you inhale, and as you release your thumbs, you exhale, it automatically calms you down. So take a deep breath, think about those thumbs, pause, reset, and pivot. And now I'm going to pivot over to the next panelist. Ms. Gretchen Powers, you are on.
There we go. I've unmuted myself. Now, the thing is, you've distracted me, Nami, with pivot, because I don't know if everyone has seen the Friends episode with Ross. That's what I'm thinking about right now, which actually is great because it brought a little humor to me at the moment. I'm just hearing his voice in my head, pivoting. Yes, thank you. And thank you to everyone. It's tremendous that so many people are joining us tonight. And it means a lot to us to not be sitting here by ourselves this evening, just talking to each other. So thank you all for tuning in. As you can see from the slide, this is quite a bit of what I want to talk about. The fact that, you know, parenting itself is hard. Parenting during a pandemic is extremely, extremely hard. And parents are really doing the very best they can in a difficult situation. And I would say that likely what doing your best looks like right now is going to be different than what doing your best looked like even 3 months ago. Your best one day might look like everyone's managed to get to their live lessons for remote learning. You've done some laundry, maybe you even exercised. Another day, your best might be that you just got everyone fed that day. So there's not always going to be consistency right now. And I think why I felt like this topic was so important to bring up is I know in my interactions with parents during this time, I'm picking up on that parents are being hard on themselves. I know that when a student has missed a live lesson with me, for instance, I'll have parents just profusely apologizing. And though it's so polite, obviously when we miss something and someone's taken their time for us, we politely apologize. But I feel like it's coming from just a place of feeling so badly, and I want parents to understand that people get it. This is a hard time, and sometimes things are going to be missed. But though we can say that, what I would really love for parents to begin to do is to be able to give that to themselves. And it's interesting. An article that came out in the Atlantic back on April 6th, a parent wrote in. There's a section on asking a therapist questions, and a parent wrote in asking the therapist, what more can I do to help my child during this time? And, I'm trying to provide them structure and I'm doing that. They're getting some, they're moving their bodies every day. We're getting that in, but I just feel like there's more I could do. And the therapist, I believe, Laura Gottlieb, said it best when she said, amid all the concern that children's parents have, amid all the concern about their children's emotional health that parents have, parents tend to forget that the most important thing they can do is take care of their own emotional health. So that said, what can you do? What can you do for your child? You can take care of your own emotions and you can regulate yourself. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how do we regulate and take care of our own emotional self. So one thing that I found extremely helpful for people, and I feel really strongly about, is learning some self-compassion and mindful self-compassion in particular. So I want you to hang in there with me around the word mindful, because I don't want you to conjure up images of lengthy periods of time sitting on a cushion, meditating. That's not what this is about. So if we can move on to the next slide. All right. So the three components of self-compassion, and I'll just briefly go through and give you an example of what it might look like in your day. So, let me pause for a second because I actually want to mention something. Sometimes people have misconceptions about what being self-compassionate might mean, and I think sometimes people think that if you're self-compassionate, that you'll become some kind of slacker. You might not try as hard to improve. You might just accept doing things in a less than optimal way. But data really shows that, in fact, people who practice self-compassion are actually not less motivated. Rather than getting racked with shame and getting stuck with harsh self-criticism, self-compassion actually allows you to move through your difficulties in a healthy manner. And you might be thinking, that's great, but that's just not how I am. I tend to be really hard on myself. But you're not alone. The majority of people are not naturally self-compassionate by nature. But everyone can learn some skills of self-compassion and experience their benefits. So again, I'd like to share with this slide the three components and then give an example. So really what mindfulness is it's simply being aware, being present of whatever's happening, noticing what's happening, what you're feeling, and when you're feeling it, rather than going into some kind of place of denial that you're feeling that way. What is self-kindness? Self-kindness is truly just being kind to yourself and not not giving into harsh self-judgment. And it also includes kind of inquiring what you might need. And then common humanity. This is just the recognition that we are all imperfect. We all lead imperfect lives. And when we acknowledge this, it can just help us feel less isolated and alone because other parents are truly going through similar struggles that you are. So I'll just give a quick example of what using self-compassion looks like. So your child's just missed a live lesson on their remote learning schedule. In your head, you're thinking, I feel like such a bad parent. I can't believe I didn't remember to get them logged on to that Zoom class on time. Now they've missed something they should have done. I'm an idiot. These are some of the automatic thoughts that will often kick up for people. Maybe you can relate to that. That's where, whoa, you pause a second. And I would say perhaps place a hand on your heart, on your chest. Take a breath. Take a breath at that moment and just acknowledge, wow, I am being really hard on myself right now. That's the mindfulness part of mindful self-compassion. Just recognizing what's happening in the moment. Next, you can think to yourself, it's okay. At least I got everyone up and fed this morning, and tomorrow I can set a reminder. That's self-kindness, the second component. Just noticing what you did do instead of berating yourself for what you didn't get done. Then you can move on to say to yourself, oh, I'm definitely not the only parent that has ever forgotten to get their kid logged onto a Zoom. Everyone forgets things sometimes. I am not a perfect parent, but neither is anyone else. That's common humanity, the third component, just remembering that you're not alone in this. So that's really what I wanted to convey to people tonight, that this is something you can begin to do. If you hang in there with us through the whole presentation, I'm going to walk you through a practice at the end, and I'd love to have you stay for that. But I truly believe that people can tap into this part of themselves, because if you really think about it, when you have a friend come to you, who's struggling, I'm sure you've had it happen already during this pandemic. You probably had to reach out with like something they're struggling with, and you have been able to offer them kind words and support. So that is within yourself. So beginning to be able to be self-compassionate is trying to give yourself some of those same kind words that you are able to offer out to others. And when you begin to be able to do that, you regulate yourself. And again, taking care of your own emotional self is going to be one of the greatest gifts you can give your child during this time of the pandemic. So I am again happy to share a practice with everyone at the end of this presentation if you'll stay, but I think I have to move on to the next presenter at this point. So I will pass it along.
Thanks, Gretchen. We're going to move on now to Brielle Chadsey at Miller School.
Thank you, Gretchen. That was wonderful. I wanted to really highlight the child experience and things that I've been hearing from students for the last 3 weeks through email, through Zooms, just how are Holliston children processing this? What are the things that they're doing really well with, and what are the things that they're really struggling with? And I first just want to acknowledge how blown away I've been by how resilient and strong and brave these kids are. And that is such a testament to you all as parents, because they have just been incredible. So I do want to acknowledge that. And my lens is 3rd through 5th grade. So this is just a snapshot. This may not be your child. This may be your child one day and not the next day. But I did come across some common themes that I think are pretty universal throughout the district. So I want to start with kind of the silver linings. If you do a rose and a thorn, what are the roses? What are the positive pieces that are coming out of this? And the 3 things that I've really found to be the overriding themes are that children are feeling connected, loved, and important to their families in their homes. They are the excitement for kids who are having their high school siblings interact with them, play knee hockey with them in the basement, learn TikTok dances with them. The college students that are home spending time with their kids or their siblings, they're just over the moon about that. So that family connection is one of those silver linings that have come out of this and that kids are feeling. Another one would be that kids are learning these new amazing creative skills, and they're exploring diverse hobbies and interests. They have the time to really be exploring new things. I've had kids talking about knitting, comics and drawing, crafting, juggling, sports skills, inventing. I had a little boy tell me that he wants to be an illustrator because he's been doing the Mo Willems YouTube videos and the Lunch Lady series YouTube videos, and he's already started to research what you need to do to be an illustrator, and that's wonderful, and that's something that I don't know he would have really touched upon before. And then the last real overriding theme that I've seen in talking with kids is that they're learning to problem solve and communicate in these brand new, wonderful ways that are skills for the future. I think we've all been on technology where, you know, our children or kids that are much younger than us are troubleshooting, and they know how to start the Zoom, they know how to disable the chat, they know how to do this, and those are skills that are going to carry them far, that they're really honing during this time. So I did want to highlight those and just acknowledge that these are wonderful things that are happening that you guys are allowing as parents. So that's just I think that's really great. And those are the silver linings to this. But there are some areas where children are struggling. And these two areas are the ones that I found were really, really just an area of struggle. And I wanted to give you in the next slide, not yet, but some actionable items and some ideas of how to address and support students with these areas. And the social connection piece with friends outside their home. I'm sure you as parents hear it all the time that I just want to see my friends. I just want to go to my friend's house just for a minute. And that is an area where kids are definitely needing our help to make those social connections. They're needing some flexibility with routines and household rules to make those connections. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, but that is a piece that children are really struggling with. And then just coping with their feelings. And Dr. Turk talked about the overwhelming and big emotions that are going back and forth and that are on that spectrum just day to day. I'm hearing children reporting to me that they're breaking their Legos, they're yelling at their parents, they're refusing. So they're understanding that they're struggling with these big feelings. And on the next slide, I added some things we can do to help them cope with some of those big feelings and just some ideas. So Meg, I don't know if you want to switch it, please. Thank you. So the first one, talking about supporting and the maintenance of those social connections. As a panel, we talked about this a little bit when we were planning, and it did come up in some of the concerns that people had raised with the survey, is that idea of screen time. And you as parents have worked so hard to put limits on screen time in your houses. And it's a struggle now because students are not able to see their friends without those screens for the majority of kids, whether it be gaming or just FaceTiming or Zooming, any of those. That's an area where I know a lot of parents are struggling, but kids need those connections. They need that ability to see their kids or their friends through screens. So one thing that you can do is thinking about screen time socializations versus using screen time just because they're bored, and allowing more flexibility for using screens with socialization, but then maybe prompting them to try something different when they're just mindlessly scrolling or when they're just playing a game that's more independent, and prompting a different activity to cope with that boredom, whether it be something outside, drawing, reading, playing a game, in real life with a sibling, something like that. But definitely acknowledging that students are craving that socialization, and unfortunately right now it is through screens. Something else you can do is, I've had a lot of parents and kids talk about organizing virtual play dates through Zoom or FaceTime, and your child may need a little bit more help with this in terms of structure. I've had some parents do little baking competitions or just previewing with kids, what are you going to talk about? Because kids don't always love the FaceTime and the Zoom. Sometimes they freeze, sometimes they're uncomfortable. So structuring and organizing, that virtual time that they do socialize with their friends may be necessary for some kids. And then the last suggestion about maintaining those social connections that I've heard from kids is that a lot of kids are FaceTiming or Zooming with their friends to complete their class assignments. And this is another way to have that interaction, but not have it be so mindlessly on a screen. So those are just some suggestions that I've heard from kids. And I don't know if any of the other panel members later on may want to bring up kind of more opinions about the screen time and that whole piece, but I do want you to take away that kind of feeling of guilt of that you're letting your child spend too much time on screens or too much time gaming with their friends, because that is what they're craving right now, and that is important to them. And that's a definite theme, I think throughout all of the children in the district. The next piece I just wanted to talk about was that coping, because kids are acknowledging that they're having a difficult time coping. And these are just some items that you can do in your house that you can incorporate into your day. And Gretchen had talked about the mindfulness and really modeling that as a parent. When you're starting to lose it, telling your child, I need to take a break. I need to take a minute. I'm going to go do some breathing. If you can't say it at that time, that's totally fine. But when you come back, process that with them and say, I had a hard time. I needed to take a minute. This is what I did. That will just reinforce to them that they can do that as well, and that's what they should be doing. And then consider just creating a calming space in the house, or a space that each family member can go to when they do need a minute. And this is something that the kids are very familiar with and have in all their classes. Many of them have in their classes. So they're used to using a calming corner or Zen Den, things like that. And encouraging kids to use that even when they're not upset. So they're practicing that just so they can get into a routine of, I have a tool. I have a tool that I can use when I'm getting frustrated. And then the last piece is just providing children with the opportunity to express their feelings. And all these feelings are okay. The feelings that they're having are okay. And they might just need that listening time, that predictable one-to-one listening time. I know a lot of people do that at bed or breakfast, something like that, just so they know that they have mom, dad, older brother there for them to just express themselves. I've had some parents also do kind of a worry jar or a journal of, this is where you write down anything you're thinking about during the day, and then we're going to go over it. And then another just simple, easy way for you to help your child express their feelings is just talking about that high and low of the day. And that gives you a great opportunity to give them guidance about those lows and what could you have done differently? What did I do in this situation? That whole piece. So those are just some quick little snippets of kind of actionable items that you can incorporate into your house that may help in those two areas where I have seen that kids are really struggling. And then the last little piece in orange is just know as a parent when your children have had enough for the day. There's been times that I've packed it up earlier than I'd like to admit and said that I'm just not going to do this and I'm going to try again tomorrow. And I want to speak for the schools in that if you're having one of those days, communicate it to the school, communicate it to your kids' teachers. We are a team. We're here for you. And, we can help make adjustments with that piece. So give yourself and your family the permission to try again tomorrow. Because as we've talked about, is everybody's doing the best that they can, and that can look different on each day. So those are just my thoughts about how our kids are processing what's going on, and that there are some really wonderful things that are coming out of this, and there are ways that we can support them with the things that aren't so great.
Thanks, Brielle. That was great to hear some of those silver linings. I appreciate those. I'm going to transition over to Jackie Weiner again, who's the director for Holliston Youth and Family, and we are grateful to have her on tonight with us.
Thanks, Meg. Hi, everyone. I'm going to reintroduce myself just very quickly for folks who might not be familiar with Holliston Youth and Family Services. I'm Jackie, and I am the director of Holliston Youth and Family Services, and we provide free mental health care to any Holliston resident in need. In addition to our counseling services, we consider our department an access point, so families, parents, guardians, community members can call our office, can call our department, can consult with a clinician, and then we sort of consider ourselves a bridge to other services, so we can provide some referrals and assessment to really determine kind of what your needs are at the moment. So write that down, Holliston Youth and Family Services. It's a resource for any Holliston community member in need. And what I'm going to talk to you about is seeking help right now. We have been fielding lots of calls from parents who are concerned. Maybe they were in the middle of a referral or in the middle of accessing care for their child, whether that's an outpatient therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And the good news is that we're all still working. And we're able to support your families. And so reaching out for help looks a little bit differently now, but you're still getting the same support as you would in person. You're just doing it over teletherapy. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk to everybody about was, when do you pick up the phone? When is it time to seek professional support? And so what I will start with is that everyone reacts differently to stressful situations. Nami had mentioned this in the beginning. People who may be responding more strongly to this crisis right now are obviously those folks who are more directly connected to this crisis, those essential workers, folks with underlying health conditions, our older adults in the community, and children and our teens. And so our reactions based off of how this is impacting us are going to differ. And they also differ depending on your age, right? So adults, we have some fears right now about our own health, maybe the health of a loved one, maybe we're experiencing some changes to our appetite, maybe we're having some difficulty sleeping. Tell me that isn't true for everybody right now, or some difficulty concentrating. And that might make us, turn to some not so great ways of coping. And for our children, they may respond in a different way. And so some things to watch for in this area are excessive crying, or, very irritable children. I'm sure there's lots of homes right now with lots of irritable kids. And again, this does not mean it's a level 5. We need to call Jackie right away because my kids are having meltdowns. No. What I will say is this is very normal in the context of a pandemic. But if you're finding that some of these things are lasting way too long, or that children are having a lot of difficulty calming themselves down, or that these behaviors are really, really getting out of control, even for you to handle, then I would say it's probably time to reach out to a school counselor, a school nurse, youth and family services, and we can talk a little bit more about what some of those resources look like. And I believe there's a few slides on here too, and we can send it out to folks here so you have it, what those resources look like. But in addition to, so irritability, you might be seeing excessive worry, sadness, unhealthy eating, acting out behaviors in teens, right? So how many of your teens are coming to you begging you to go and hang out with their friends, right? Not right now, right? Is what we have to keep reminding them. And for some of those kids, you might be seeing more poor performance in school, or avoidance of school, difficulty with attention, avoiding activities they once enjoyed or hobbies that they were once interested in. They might be having some physical signs of anxiety, maybe some headaches, maybe some stomach aches. And then for some of our teenagers, they might be turning to some unhealthy ways of coping, whether that's with alcohol or drugs or marijuana use. And so what we need to be aware of is that how badly are these behaviors impacting our kids right now, and what's the level of their functioning. And if you're really starting to feel concerns, if that's something that's going through your head, then trust that. And, yes, you can get help during a pandemic. And we are all able to provide some telehealth services for you. And there's data actually that suggests now that teletherapy is as effective as in-person therapy. And so one thing I will say about teletherapy as well is that children are way more fluent on screens than we are. So while we might be concerned about, are they going to receive the same type of care if I was to go in person and meet with somebody, for the most part, we're finding that this is working very well. And so as a parent, try and tell yourself, to give yourself permission, one, to not know everything. We're asking you to help, now homeschool your children. We're not asking you to be psychologists in addition to that. And so the more you give yourself permission to feel anxious about this, the less anxious you're actually going to be. We're living in some scary times, and some scary things are going on right now in the world. And so try not to beat yourself up about this if you're feeling really stuck and at a loss for what to do. And the other thing I will say is that, as you're trying to process this with your child, one of the things that might come up for you is, oh, okay, I need to fix this. And, again, you do not need to fix this. And one of the best interventions I can tell you to do right now is actually just to listen and to empathize with your child and what they're experiencing, and really just listening. And when you do that, you're helping somebody else understand that you really get it. And so, what I might say is, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Let's you and I work hard and try and find you somebody who can help us with this. And one, if they're sharing it with you, that is a huge first step. So that is huge. Pat yourself on the back that they're able to come to you. And so I will say that, when you do find a therapist, you're going to be finding somebody hopefully that's doing some evidence-based work with your child, but underlying all of that is they're just going to be listening. And so that would be, one of the most powerful interventions I think you can do right now as a parent. And the second thing I would say is that if you have a child who's very emotional right now, what are those triggers? And what can you do as a parent to try and manage that? And so some really simple ideas I have around this are, are they getting enough sleep? Are they hungry? Do they need some time alone? Alone time, can be kind of concerning, right? If they're isolating, but if they're a teenager and they're around their parents 24/7, that's to be expected. So one of the things that gets really frustrating, I think, for parents is that we're seeing their emotional reactions to things, and it's making us reactive to that. And so that just continues the cycle. And so what we just want to do is notice and be mindful of what you're feeling. And timing is everything, right? So if you're in the middle of a fight with your child, or there's a disagreement happening at home and there's sort of a lot of challenges happening, you don't need to respond to everything right in that moment, right? So they're going to be okay if you just need to take a step away and take a deep breath and then kind of go back to that conversation. But you don't need to respond in the moment. And, I think what as a parent, whatever is feasible for you to handle right now is okay, right? So if there's, I often talk to parents a lot about kind of picking their battles. And, one of the things that you might want to think about is, where's your energy best exerted right now, right? So if there's socks on the floor, maybe we don't put as much emphasis on that versus if your teen wants to go out with their friends, right? We're going to focus more on the immediate needs, the health and safety needs, and we might need to let some of those other things go for the time being. But, right sizing sort of what fits for your family is really important, and it will help alleviate, I think, a lot of the stress that you're feeling. And so the other piece that I wanted to mention tonight to everyone is that, we're at some point, we are going to get back to living our lives again. I promise you, we will get back to living our lives again. And how do we help kids with this? How do we keep kids from feeling so anxious about that step? And how do we help ourselves with our own anxiety around this? And so what I will say is, you are not going to not be anxious about that. The idea is, how do we reemerge in the world in a way that is adaptive and safe, right? So that's really about managing the anxiety and sitting with the anxiety and working through that anxiety. And the triggered reactions to going out again are going to be there. And there are treatment providers that can help you with this, especially if you're noticing that that's going to be a difficult thing for yourself or for your child. And so really just making a space to process that, I think, is important. And, getting comfortable with risk in a way that we have not been required before. Just pre-pandemic, just even walking out of your house is a risk, right? We don't think about that. We think about that now, but there is risk involved day to day, whether it's a pandemic or not a pandemic. And so allowing for anxiety to be there is really important. And I think a really big component of this is coming together as a community and showing some solidarity for each other is the best way that we're going to kind of emerge from this and be better and stronger. And so I kind of leave you with those thoughts, and I hope we've been able to answer some of your questions up until this point. And if not, I'm happy to be a resource for families. If there's questions you still have that I did not get to, please let me know. Shoot me an email, Jackie Weiner at holliston.k12.ma.us, and my information will be available for folks here on our Zoom call tonight. So with that, I turn it over to a parent with her parent's perspective, which is great that we have Barbara Ryan here for that.
Thank you very much. I really just want to first thank friends, neighbors, and the community for coming together and being in this medium, if you will, tonight. and just really appreciate you showing up. It means, I think, a lot. I know just to be here with a lot of people to me, and I feel very supported. I want to thank Dr. Jackson, obviously the panel, Meg, who really helped pull this together, Dr. Turk, Gretchen, Brielle, and Jackie. I also want to give a nod to Stacy Raffi on the school committee, as well as Sarah Fitzgerald, who is the Holliston PTO president. They've been nothing shy of just supportive of me when I said, hey, okay, sign me up for that. I'll do that even though I don't know anybody. And then my last nod is to my neighbor and friend, Jen Prince, who has been very supportive and helped pull this together as well. So thank you for that. Those are my thank yous. I just wanted to share this family barometer. I don't know if I'm going to come off as a comedian or inappropriate, or just some of my experiences. I am my family's barometer, probably pre-pandemic and during pandemic. But these things I found through greatschools.org, just one resource. This struck me, this article that came out this week talked about routines, rules, relationships, and rituals. And I tried to think about what that meant to me and my family. I know some of my neighbors, I giggle with them. I'm like, well, yeah, if you hear me yelling, we're all still okay. But a lot of those real raw experiences here at home. And I've either found myself to be very, very rigid, or kind of like, yeah, laundry's on the table for day 6, and I guess we'll eat on the counter again. So just these kind of comings and goings, the ups and downs, the waves have been very real, even though I've tried to keep routine, kind of that same waking, same sleeping in my professional life. Did a lot of work in public health around trying to change the health of sleep in communities. So sleep is something that I've always been very concerned about and with, and continue to try to do that. Rules, the consistency, I'm mainly consistent, but then again, my children will tell me, well, you told me this, and why did you change that now? So again, that notion of consistency and predictability are those checks and balances for me when I'm feeling that my mind and my heart's not connected, or I've kind of had it up to here. I go back to, okay, if I'm the barometer and I'm here or I'm here over the place, I really see that and feel that in my house. I do that check. Relationships, trying to be kind and using kind words. I literally sometimes stop myself if I'm in one of those moments. And if someone knocked on the door who was a friend, and if they'd seen me 30 seconds earlier, probably either yelling at my kids or why don't you do this? And then I have this big smile on my face. I have to remember that kindness has to stay inside my house too, and whether it's my words or my actions, because the stress can be pretty overwhelming. I loved what the panel members have shared about screen time. We've always used that as a big reward in this, and a lot of conversations around, but that's how they're connecting, either with each other, particularly with a teen or a young adolescent, really just letting those reins loosen, because again, what we've seen is those ensuing arguments or bad feelings if like, but I was out in the middle of a game and don't you understand, and I'm not a gamer, so I really don't understand. Showing where I'm at in the chronologic phase of my life, but again, wading through that and trying to avoid those. Really, does it really matter? Like, if he has 10 more minutes in the grand scheme of life on his screen, probably not. And he'll go to bed happier. Well, we won't have to go to those spaces again. So I really appreciated what was shared about screen time. And then rituals, again, I try to think of pre-pandemic, during pandemic, or just as a family, had a lot of different things, whether being together, walking, playing baseball in our little backyard. Meatless Mondays we've tried, although we had a steak dinner tonight, so go figure. And what we usually try to do something meatless. So these are just things we're doing as a family. Is it right? I don't know. On some days I feel like I'm all over it, and I've been I've not been too rigid. I've not been too relaxed. I went on strike about 3 weeks ago. My husband was home, and I said, I don't have any energy. So I'm not doing laundry. I can't vacuum. I really found myself really paralyzed, and thankfully he was home and willing. So maybe 6 days on the table became 10. I don't know, with this mound of laundry. But I really was paralyzed, and just having that support, reaching out to friends, and being real with those feelings, and allowing myself, right? And then being like, well, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Just I need my space. And we actually did one of those things. We have spaces we can each go in this home just to get away. And so really, that's been really helpful. I think, Brielle, you said that, have those spaces in your home. And so we practice that. So that's a little bit about the Ryan family. I really thank this community for being so welcoming and so gracious. And having moved from the DC area, we chose this to be our home. And I think my husband and I really pinch ourselves at just the depth and breadth of kindness and just I know I could reach out right now and say, hey, I need something. And it's the type of community that I'm proud to be part of. And hopefully something like this and being able to be part of the community and give back in this way is helpful to others. So hopefully you found a little humor in my sharing. Absolutely not perfect. Marching towards progress, never perfection. And if I'm going to turn it back to Meg and say thank you again to my fellow panel members for letting me be here, as well as I think we're going to have Q&A. And if you liked this, please let us know. I'll put my MindShare hat on, PTO hat. Please let us know if there's something we can improve upon, or if there's a topic that you'd like to explore more and think this is worth your time and the information is valuable. We'd love to hear that from you as well. That's my plug for saying A, thank you, and B, we'd love to know your thoughts. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Barbara. That was wonderful. Hopefully, as I was visualizing myself sort of going through this roller coaster, that everyone felt a sense of either commonality or where our differences are, that something resonated with you and your family individually. We're going to shift now. Dr. Jackson and I will man the chat bar. If folks want to send to either Dr. Jackson or myself questions, we have about a little less than a half an hour left to share in some questions. We have been recording it, so we will be sure to put up this presentation on the district website, the slides and the video recording, for those who are unable to participate or who have to duck out early. So we're going to do a little Q&A. We have a resource slide for you as well, folks to contact, and then a mindfulness exercise for those that want to join on. So we'll give some time for folks to jump in the chat bar. Brad, did you want to share anything before we start doing some questions?
Well, actually, I wanted to start it off. I did have a few questions that were sent my way that I wanted to share aloud, if I could, and ask the panelists if they could comment on a few of these. One of the first questions we received was about loss and an acknowledgement that our children are losing on many milestones and experiences that we expect, obviously not the least of which is members of our senior class, but all of our students are losing out on, are experiencing loss of milestones. So how do we help panelists? How do parents help their children deal with that type of loss?
I'm going to pipe in on that one just to get it going. And I think everybody on this panel has perspective. But I think that the most important thing is validating that feeling that it's true, it is lost. And it's lost in that moment. And that being honest is important because it allows your child to stay in that moment and be heard. And once they're heard, there's opportunity for substitution. It's not the same thing, but working together with community, with schools, I think some of these milestones will be replaced, not in the fashion that anybody was hoping for, but as a token, as a place marker, because at the end of the day, milestones help us remember points in time. And the truth is that the seniors graduating from high school will remember that they graduated high school in a pandemic. And all of those parts are true and part of their experience. So I think balancing and counterbalancing, embracing the reality, but also working together collaboratively. And, you know, I think there are lots of different ways in which this is already happening for many kids who are missing some of these milestones, from drive-by birthday parties, which is no substitution for the real thing, but it marks the event, to virtual high school graduations that are going to be in drive-in movie theaters, to graduating seniors from college who are going to go back on alumni weekend, hopefully if those colleges are open, and celebrate their graduations at those points in time. I think at every mark, there are going to be ways into which to make this better. Somebody I know who I was speaking with today, her son's about to graduate from college, and they had plans to go out to the special restaurant, and they converted their dining room into that restaurant with photos of what the restaurant overlooks in the city that they were supposed to be in. So some of this is creativity, and some of this is recognizing this is simply a truth, and there's no distortion around it, but there is replacement, and acceptance around those kinds of things really creates creativity and builds resilience. I'm going to turn this over to other members.
Any other members of the panel who'd like to speak up?
I'd be happy to say something. I mean, I think that, yeah, I agree with Dr. Trick. One of the things I think is so important is just staying with whatever they're experiencing as the loss. I know as parents, it's very hard for us to sit with our children feeling upset. We really want to fix their feelings. We really want to make them feel better. So it would be very easy for a parent to jump in and say, oh, but we could do this, or but maybe we'll da da da. It's like they'll react to that negatively. They'll be like, but you don't get it. I'm not getting to have the graduation I was supposed to have. So really just staying with them in their experience of the loss is what's going to help them a lot. Yeah, you'll definitely be able to move at a certain point to all kinds of things that, you know, maybe the town is even going to come up with ideas, certainly. But really staying with them, with the experience they're having, will help them a lot.
Let me take that question in a slightly different direction. While the students are experiencing loss, I think it's important to acknowledge that their parents are experiencing loss as well. That mom and dad have been looking forward to 18 years for graduation, or to see their son play his senior year of baseball, or to see their fifth grader complete their Miller School experience. So how do we as parents, process that loss almost at the same time as our children are? Oh, I stumped the panel.
No, you didn't stump.
No, I didn't know who was jumping in. Go ahead.
Barbara, did you want to say something, or want me? Okay, I'll speak. I think, you know, going back to that oxygen mask on the airplane, you have to sort of take care of and be aware of your own feelings in the moment, and honor those and validate those. I think that not only is important in terms of your own self-care, but equally important in terms of your ability to empathize with your child and stay present with their experience. And to Gretchen's point, staying present in that moment of loss, if you try to poo-poo it and move on too quickly with some sort of panacea or antidote, invalidates their experience and further confuses them and or enrages them. So I think really taking care of yourself, staying in that moment, putting on your mask no pun intended, in order to be able to empathize with your child is what needs to happen. And grieving the loss that you wanted to be in those bleachers, cheering your kid on when he or she got that home run. You want to be able to stand up and cheer for your child walking down the graduation aisle and all of the other kinds of things. And it's sad and it's true. And the other thing I did want to say about this is that loss of milestones is as big as any other kind of loss. And each of our losses, while some may seem and are more tragic, how we experience whatever loss we are experiencing is as tragic as that feels. And nobody should feel minimized or marginalized in terms of the feelings they have.
Any other panelists want to comment on the concept of loss, either from a parent point of view or from a child point of view?
I will. We do rosebud, thorn, or high and lows in our family. And my little guy, who's 10, this past week, he always surprises me in a lot of ways, in a lot of good ways. He's very introverted. And so the news of schools being closed for the rest of the year, he did a big, yeah. And then that night during Rosebud Thorn, his rose was also a thorn. He was very sad that school was closed, yet he was also a little happy about it. So it just gave me this insight to this, my introvert, and I'm fairly extroverted. So again, that whole notion of just allowing him to be and process in his own way and not pushing him along like, oh, come on, sometimes as we do, and sometimes we do as moms or parents, get them moving along. But I just thought that was really profound, that it was this juxtaposition of I'm really happy, but yet I'm really sad about it too. And so it was just really touching to me just to continue to watch, to see his wheels spin even as he was going to sleep.
Brad, here's another question that I think we might want to, hopefully one of the panel members can talk to too. Any parents or guardians at home who might be observing that their children are starting to lose interest in school, and that idea of sort of remaining with the stamina in place. So I'm wondering if any of the panelists could talk to what parents might be observing in terms of, regardless of age, their child sort of, maybe losing interest, and how do we renew that love of school for them?
Do you want me to say something to that?
Sure.
It feels like a chore some days just to get up, get dressed, get your kids up, have this kind of routine. But again, being that barometer in my house, I can easily set the tone for the day. And I really have to be compassionate. I'm going to use Gretchen, the self-compassion. I got to be kind to myself, and sometimes just put my happy face on when I don't want to. And I think that helps my children. And then I have to go find my own space to kind of feel what I want to feel in a day. But to keep them motivated. And again, I have an 8th grader and a 4th grader. So they're even at very different developmental stages. And on some days it feels easy and wow, school's already done for the day, or we call it home learning. I can never duplicate what all of you do. So we have a home learning environment. And then other days I just feel completely deflated. And so it's, again, that back and forth. But again, I call myself a barometer and know that some I have to really pull my bootstraps up, and other days I feel like, oh, the bluebird's here and the sun shines out and we're moving along. So I just share that from a very personal experience, that I know my children feed off my energy.
Yeah, I can jump in too on this if you want, or go ahead, Jackie. Were you going to jump in?
Go ahead, Gretchen, you go first.
I was just going to say, it's a tricky question, right? How to keep kids motivated. I know it's going to be May, and as the days get nicer out, maybe even harder to keep people motivated. I think I think if you're recognizing that they're lacking motivation, first talk about it with them, you know, validate that you get it, that it's hard to do this learning from home. And you can talk about whatever your own experience is, about whatever you're trying to do at home too, whether you're also trying to work at home and how it's hard to be motivated. If there's anything you can share with them about what's helpful to you and getting yourself motivated, I think that's helpful. And just kind of really just trying to say to them, I get it, it's hard to be motivated, but we're going to keep on going. We're going to try each day. And on the days that you're less motivated, let's pick one or two things that we think we could do. You know what I mean? Just always giving them that sense that you get where they're at, but you're also like encouraging them to move forward, I think is how I would look at it.
Jackie?
Yeah, I'll just jump in here with what everyone's saying, just to piggyback off of it and take it one step further. I think one reason why kids are feeling why we're feeling we need to reinvigorate students in this learning process is because there's some grief in their sadness. So one, just the acknowledgement around that. And one of the things I think could be really beneficial is structure. And I think the lack of structure can cause a lot of uncertainty in kids. And sometimes structure can be kind of motivating for them. And I'm not talking about the color-coded schedules I've seen online. I think that those schedules are probably great for a lot of kids, and I think for some kids, not so much. But I think that one of the ways that you can just provide a little bit of structure is, okay, what time are we going to get up in the morning? When are we going to have lunch? When are we going to touch base? You know, so you're going to do your learning thing in the morning, and I'm going to go do my work thing. But can lunchtime be our check-in time, setting the table for lunch? I think is a really good way just to, you know, check in with kids, ask them how they're doing with their day, think about the remainder of their day. I think anything you can do to provide a little bit more support at home, if you're starting to notice that the willingness and the motivation is getting squashed, is just trying to figure out, you know, what type of structure can I co-construct with my child, you know, so that they have some options in there as well. That's just the last thing I will
Thank you.
say.
Actually, I'd actually like to jump in here and say a couple of things. First of all, I think it's really important that we acknowledge that this is not school.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that no one signed up for, and everyone is coping as best they can. And there may be days that they just can't connect, and that's okay. If I would suggest, if you're finding it hard to keep your child motivated for a period of multiple days and multiple days in a row, to reach out to the teacher. Perhaps they can add some ideas to the activities that your child may find personally interesting to them, that they can perhaps get a connection to and reconnect that way, or just a way for them to socially connect with their classmates. One of the things we have learned through this entire process is that there is no, that school is a social experience, and that the first thing we have to recreate is that social experience as best we can. So my suggestion is to remind your children that this is not school, but that this is a way for them to stay connected with their friends, and also to reach out to their teachers, because they may have some ideas about ways to connect with some old assignments or things that they had done in a class that they enjoyed. Nami?
Yes. And I think that's so true to sort of, you know, what you're saying, to paint a broader picture about what's going on, because I think especially we're spending so much time at home and insulated that it's very hard to get lost in those details, and reframing what this experience is of school at this juncture is important. I do think that what is helpful in those moments where you get stuck and you lose motivation is to say, tomorrow's another day. We'll try again tomorrow, certainly. But I also think that in the moment you can get further withdrawn within that, so that the, sort of the low motivation becomes inertia. And one of the things that you can do is what I would call either a cognitive or behavioral distraction. And it's not a distraction in sort of in a negative way, but it's really in an effort to shift set. So that you can get some energy going. And one of the things you can do is say, look, I get you, you acknowledge the situation, and this is different, and today is just one of those days, and I want you to do something else instead, and give them the something else to do. And I have two ideas in particular that I want to share. One is that you simply provide them with a replacement activity, but it's a very structured, not color-coded, but it is a very structured kind of generous gesture where you choose one good thing to do for yourself and one good thing to do for someone else. And it can be a tiny gesture, but in those moments, they don't want to do the work, that's fine, but let's build some other kind of skill instead. And it can be as simple as going and bringing a cookie to your dad who's stuck in his office on a really long Zoom conference call. It can be, sending an emoji or a meme or what have you to a friend, to get a chuckle out of that person. And then doing one good thing for yourself. What is that one good thing? I'm going to take a lap around the house. I'm going to go out in my backyard. I'm going to jump up and down. I'm going to do my nails. I'm going to blow dry my hair. Any of those little kinds of things that really demonstrate self-care, and recognize that when plan A isn't working, you go to plan B. And then tomorrow you start again with plan A. So that's something that I think about. And then the other kind of thing that I think about is bookending these moments. I think sometimes people lose motivation when it feels endless. And frankly, right now, this is endless. And, that whole experience, which is our Gestalt experience, is getting transferred onto those little moments where I just don't want to do the work. This is just so not interesting anymore. I'm bored with this whole, initially things might have been novel. Now it's just not fun. If you bookend a particular activity and say, at the beginning of X, I want you to do, or I want you to choose something that's interesting for you, or choose something preferred that may or may not be related to the work that you have to do. And then I want you to bookend it at the end with the celebration that I completed it, or completed as much as I could. And you articulate what those bookend activities are. It's not a reward or an incentive as much as a celebration. And I think that those are important, to celebrate those tiny details. I was speaking with a client the other day who talked about the fact that she literally couldn't get off her couch to go and write a proposal for a company that she was, pitching something to. And she sat and she struggled and felt horribly about herself. And what she did, I'm not suggesting that our kids will do this, but boy, it would be great if they did. She said, well, I can't do that right now, but I'm going to go and fold just one basket of laundry. And she was very particular. She said to me, I'm not folding my kids' clothing. I'm folding the towels. She wanted to just do something different, and she shifted set. So it would be great if that's what our kids want to do when they lose motivation. Chances are that will never happen, but they can find something that feels either rewarding in its simplicity, or in the fact that it can just allow their brains to sort of just chill out for a little bit. So I just wanted to add those thoughts.
So I'm mindful, you should excuse the pun, Gretchen, but I'm mindful of the hour, and I do want to give us an opportunity to participate in Gretchen's exercise. I do, this slide that's on your screen today, I did it right now. I did want to share with you that there are, while we are going to meet after this to decide what direction, if there's additional conversations we should be having and hosting around this and other subjects, we would welcome that, that input from you as well. In the meantime, if you do have questions specifically about what's going on in your child's academic world, We do encourage you to talk to your talk or email to your child's classroom teacher or teachers, their special education liaison, or the building administrator, be it the principal or assistant principal. If you do have concerns about any type of behavioral or mental health concern, all of our school counselors and guidance counselors are working, and they are available by email, and are eager to work with you on these issues. Our school nurses are all working as well. They can be helpful, and as well as the building administrator. This is the information for Holliston Youth and Family Services. Holliston Youth and Family Services is the hidden gem of Holliston. This is an amazing organization that Holliston should be extremely proud of and should take advantage of. Don't be afraid to email, to call. Jackie is the best, and I can't tell you how much I enjoy working with her. If you're unable to connect, the town of Holliston does have access. We've paid for it through the town and school budgets to something through William James College called Interface Referral Service, which is a mental health and wellness referral helpline that's available Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And if you have questions at a district level, here's my email, the assistant superintendent, and Meg's email as well. Meg, if you can move on to the next slide. I did want, as we do have some, and this slide presentation will be available to families. Here is some more information on resources that you could read, or videos that you can watch. Some of these issues, some of these are great and helpful organizations. And with that, Meg, why don't you provide us with some closing thoughts and then turn it over to Gretchen.
Thank you very much, Brett. I appreciate that. So hopefully, I think we are overwhelmed by the turnout, which confirms our feeling that as we're feeling overwhelmed, everyone else is feeling overwhelmed, and we're just grateful to have parents who want to connect with one another and share in this experiences. And hopefully something, as I mentioned, resonated with you, and that we are going to hopefully feel a smoother ride on this roller coaster that we're all experiencing with our children. I'm not going to steal credit for this. This is from our wonderful school adjustment counselor, Gretchen Powers, to sort of really sum up what we're all experiencing at this point. And Gretchen's going to, for those of you that want to stay on, take us through a mindfulness exercise. And after she does that, again, just wanted to acknowledge our appreciation for the collaboration between our two big parent organizations, the Holliston PTO, MindShare portion of that, and Holliston SEPAC, our special education parent association, and their willingness to come together to create this hopefully great event tonight that everyone was able to connect with and go back feeling a little less overwhelmed in their homes this evening. Gretchen, you want to jump on? It's all you.
Thank you to all of you who have stayed on for this length of time. I certainly appreciate it. The exercise that I wanted to take us through tonight is called the Parenting Pause. I've sort of combined, the Parenting Pause is a title used by Susan Pollack, and I do highly recommend that book to any parent who could use a little more self-compassion. Her book is Self-Compassion for Parents. It's in the resources, but I've chosen to add some elements of another practice to also refer to as the self-compassion break. So this is an exercise in shifting our awareness and bringing acceptance to bear on the experience of the moment in the moment. So if you just start, we'll just start by adjusting yourself to sit however comfortably you can right now. You may just need to adjust how you're sitting or whatever, just to be comfortable. Perhaps just being aware of the feeling of your body on your seat or your feet on the floor. See if you can take just a few calming breaths. Just breathing in and breathing out. While doing this, I'd like you to bring to mind a situation just recently in parenting that you may have had some strong emotions around, something that has really caused you some stress or difficulty. Perhaps pick something around a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10, not the least emotion-filled like a 1, but not the most emotion-filled either, like a 10. By practicing this when our emotions are at a manageable level, we build the neural circuits to be able to do this kind of shifting when things get really tough. So just take a moment to bring to mind what that stressful situation is for you. Continuing to breathe in and continuing to breathe out. This is a moment to just pause. When aware of a strong or difficult emotion, just pause and see if you can feel comfortable placing your hand on your heart. Acknowledging that this is a moment of difficulty. Placing a hand on your heart activates the release of oxytocin, the hormone of safety and trust. See if you can empathize now with your experience. Recognize how you're feeling by saying even, oh, this is hard, or this is scary to me, or maybe even this is just sad. That's mindfulness, acknowledging how you're feeling in the moment. You do this to acknowledge and care about yourself as the experiencer of something that is distressing. You are taking this moment to just pause with your hand on your heart to acknowledge you're experiencing some difficult emotions. This difficulty is part of life as a parent. That's common humanity. Other parents truly feel this way too. See if you can add these words to break up that automatic loop in your head of negativity. May I bring kindness to this feeling I'm having right now. Are there some words that you would love to have a friend whisper in your ear right now to get you through these tough emotions? See if you can hear them. May I accept this moment just as it is? Breathing in, this is just at this moment. Breathing out, I accept this. These phrases can be repeated. May I bring a moment of kindness to this feeling. May I accept this moment as it is. A few more relaxing breaths will bring us to the conclusion of this practice. Breathing in, may I bring kindness to these feelings. And breathing out, may I accept this. Thank you all so much for coming tonight and for participating. That's just one small practice of many you might find helpful, truly, just placing your hand on your heart. You could be standing in the kitchen. Just place your hand on your heart when your child runs up to you and starts yelling and screaming about something. Just take a moment to pause. We really appreciate you all being here tonight. Take care.
Thank you so much, Gretchen, and thank you again to everyone who joined in tonight. We're always grateful to be such a part of a strong community, but even more so than now, we appreciate the support and the care you are providing your child and how you are working with us to educate them. So please be sure to take care of yourself. Stay healthy. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.
Panelists, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We will connect again for next steps.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you.
That was really good. Thank you, guys. Got a
Thank
lot
you,
of positive
everybody.
feedback. It was awesome. Everyone have a good night.
Great.
Take care of yourself.
Good night, everybody.
All right. See ya.
Good night.